You're listening to Psych with Mike. For more episodes or to connect with the show with comments, ideas, or to be a guest, go to www.psychwithmike.com. Follow the show on Twitter @PsychWithMike or like the Facebook page @PsychWithMike. Now, here's Psych with Mike.
Welcome into the Psych with Mike Library. This is Dr. Michael Mahan, and I am here, as always, with Mr. Brett Newcomb.
I'm like a bad record. Just keep coming back. Just keep playing.
Bad penny.
Yeah.
Keep on finding it over and over again.
Well, it was one of my family roles.
Yeah. Being a bad penny?
Yeah.
Yeah. I kind of feel like that maybe we, as a general term, ubiquitous society at large, kind of jumped the shark a little bit.
We appear to have.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So it appeared, so we're in August as we are filming this, the first week of August, and in June and July, I think that there was a feeling, a perception in the zeitgeist of society that we were at the end of the pandemic, that we could move on. Did you get that sense?
Yes, people were bursting at the seams to get out and run wild.
Yeah,
after over a year of being isolated, where people took it pretty seriously, at least in our region, many people took it pretty seriously. We live in Missouri. Mm-hmm. Parts of the state did not, and are still not taking it seriously enough.
But even though the vaccination rates had exploded in the beginning, then they trailed off. It looked like that by June, everybody who wanted to get a vaccination had opportunities to get a vaccination. So we were moving towards.
So the president had a goal to get 70% of the adult population
4th of July.
By the 4th of July. Got about 50%, and then it stalled out.
Yeah.
And as a result, the virus modified itself. It evolved, mm-hmm. and they have now the Delta variant, which is different from the original COVID-19 virus, and we're in trouble because it is more contagious, mm-hmm. and it seems to be damaging to younger people, and we don't know that it wouldn't be as damaging in older people, but most of the older people got vaccinated. Mm-hmm. So I've been watching a lot in the news. The numbers of infections are continuing to skyrocket exponentially. The numbers of death, not so much so.
Yeah.
They've learned some more about treating the virus, making it more survivable, mm-hmm. And the vaccines, for those of us who have it, we could still have a breakthrough. If we've been vaccinated, we can have a breakthrough of COVID. Some do, but it's rare. But even if we do, the seriousness of our infection is much more limited. So we're much less likely to even be hospitalized with it.
Right. So let's talk a little bit specifically about that.
All right.
Because what I want to get to is life after the pandemic. But as we were talking about, did we jump the shark a little bit? Because have we gone backwards instead of forward? So just specifically about vaccinations, what has appeared to happen, they had this case in New England where people who were fully vaccinated ended up testing positive for coronavirus, and they had a viral load, so a number of viruses detectable in their nasal passages, which were congruent, they were equal to the viral load that somebody who hadn't been vaccinated had. So one of the things that we now have to talk about is the difference between what's called systemic and localized immunity. So the shots that we were all given, if you had an a messenger RNA shot, messenger RNA shot, mRNA, actually gave you what's called systemic immunity. That means that even if you are exposed to the virus, that you're not going to become sick, and that has proven out. So less than 10% of all the people who are in the hospital now with COVID have been fully vaccinated. And so that's exactly congruent with the numbers that the vaccination trials produced. We knew that there would be some people who would still get sick. That's why they said the vaccines were, in the case of Pfizer, like 96% effective, and in the case of Moderna, were 94% effective. So we knew that somewhere around 10% of people might still get the disease.
Johnson & Johnson was like 56%, but it
Right.
wasn't the mRNA.
Right, right. And so we're seeing numbers that are exactly congruent with that. But what that means is that your body fights off the infection. But what we now see is that if a person who is fully vaccinated gets exposed to the virus can grow in their nasal passages even though they don't get sick.
So they become a host.
So they become a host,
Yeah.
but they don't actually develop any symptoms. And that would be local immunity. So we need local immunity in the nose. And they knew from the beginning that a nasal spray would be the best vaccination for a respiratory disease. But the nasal sprays are harder to make. So there are 7 nasal sprays that are currently in production. They will be coming online soon. And so the boosters that we get will likely be nasal sprays, and so you'll have then systemic and localized immunity, and you'll be very well protected against being infected at all.
Well, they're even talking about combining the booster for the COVID with the regular flu shot.
Sure, and that's probably but they'll probably be nasal sprays when we start getting those. Like we've always gotten the flu shot as a shot.
Right.
In the future, we'll probably get that as a nasal spray because you need to have that immunity in the mucosal membranes of the nose so that the virus can't get a
So
foothold.
there's another element we need to talk about.
Yeah.
I'm totally vaccinated.
Yeah,
I am safe, and I'm in a high-risk population. I'm 74 years old.
yeah,
I can still, being vaccinated, not likely to get sick from having a breakthrough infection, at least sick enough to be hospitalized. I can still carry enough viral load to
infect another person.
5 or 6 other people.
yes,
And that is of concern,
Right.
especially if I'm around immune-compromised people
Right.
or I'm around children.
right.
And like under 12 cannot at the moment be vaccinated because it's not an FDA-approved vaccine.
Right.
So until that change occurs and under 12 can be vaccinated, that population is at risk, and we're now discovering that the Delta really is drawn to that population and can cause them significant damage, including death.
And, I know that all of this is a lot. It's a lot for me. And I'm like, this is my wheelhouse. This is exactly what I do is just geek out on the research and trying to figure out the answers to these kinds of things. And obviously, I'm not a scientist. I'm not building these vaccines in a laboratory. Those people are clearly much smarter than I am, but just the informational part of it. And I know it's a lot, but the point being that we will eventually, before the end of this calendar year, we'll have effective nasal sprays that'll give us local immunity. We'll have the mRNA and the Johnson & Johnson, the AstraZeneca vaccines that will give us systemic immunity, and that will really get us to a place where we can much more confidently say that the pandemic is over, or at least for people who have been completely, totally vaccinated with both local and systemic vaccines. Now, that being the case, obviously, there's still a lot of people who feel like that the pandemic is either over or it's over for them because they don't want to continue to be in a pandemic state, which I totally understand. Psychologically, I can't even imagine the toll that this has taken on society. I don't think we're going to know for 5 or 10 years exactly how strenuous that this has been.
In so many ways, in so many levels. Changes in the work environment. How many corporate systems are still going to have big office complexes that the staff is supposed to come into every day? What will that do to the population of these large mega cities where people have gone to work, like New York, because their company headquarters were there? Can you work from Potosi, Missouri for a company in New York City?
Right.
And can you accomplish the same work with Zoom and computers and online work? Can work from home, and how much? Education. Zoom classes for kids, taking online courses for kids of different ages, different racial groupings, different religious groupings, all that. How are we going to pay for that?
Yeah.
Who's going to do it? What's the impact going to be on their educational development? How good is it educationally compared to the traditional in the classroom educational model?
Right. And in the context of the office structure, there's some people who clearly thrive working from home. There are other people who want to be in the office. I know as an educator at the university, there are some students who love being online, and there's some students who don't function well that way and want to be back in the classroom.
Right.
And what I'm afraid of is if we get a corporate structure where we have this dichotomy, some people are working from home, some people are in the office. Are the people in the office, they're going to be seen? Are they going to be more likely to be promoted?
Yes.
How are you going to promote somebody that you don't even know? Maybe you've never even met.
Right.
I think that's going to be a huge deal. And
brown nosing is such an essential component.
well, I mean, you're saying that tongue in cheek, but it's true.
Yeah.
I mean, and whether it's brown nosing or not, just being able to see you. If I see you every day, I feel like I know you better, and I trust you more than if you're some guy from Wichita.
Well, also,
that I've never met.
If we are in person, we each have an opportunity to read the nonverbals
Exactly.
in the environment.
Well, that was the
which
next
is
thing.
a significant component of our communication skills.
I think that's huge.
Yeah.
And it's been growing. It's been growing since the advent of the internets. Thank you, Al Gore. And it's become so pervasive. One of the things that is absolutely stunning and amazing to me is that the average high school senior goes out less often today than the average 8th grader did 10 years ago.
I remember coming home and finding my son.
But hang on. Let that sink in. Do we understand what that means?
The world has changed.
That the average 12th grader goes out less than the average 8th grader did just 10 years ago. That's a seed change in society. But anyway, I interrupted you. You were going to tell a story about your son.
Well, he just was online playing a video game. I said, "What are you doing?" He says, "I'm playing with my friend in Germany." Mm-hmm. I mean, and he was in the 8th or 9th grade at the time. Yeah.
You've never been to Germany?
Yeah, exactly. And you're not sure he's in Germany.
Right.
He says he is. You're not sure he's a he. There's so many complexities.
And we're not dissing that. We're not trying to say that. Oh, okay. Well, I'm not, because I understand that is a wave of the future. And for people who have difficulty with social cueing, what we used to call Asperger's, I think that has a really therapeutically beneficial component to it.
I agree with you.
Okay.
It can have.
Yeah. But it's hard to know that person, and you can't interpret nonverbals when you can't see somebody.
Right. I saw an article this morning saying that for the first time, or not for the first time, but at a more significant level for the last 10 years, new construction for churches in America has declined.
Wow.
We're not building new churches. Mm-hmm. And there are a lot of church buildings that are for sale right now because the percentage of Americans that say they are churchgoers is declining in terms of traditional church experiences. I belong to a church that's one of the traditional Protestant denominations. We have a very nice facility where I live and where I go, but they have moved in the last year to online church, and they haven't had accessible open church. It's been online, and now they're trying to do a straddle, have some online and some in person, but you have to register ahead of time. You have to provide your vaccination status. You have to be met at the door by an usher and taken to a specific assigned seat. You don't just wander in. You don't mix and mingle. You don't. It isn't what it once was. And one of the questions is, will we go back?
Right.
Or do we modify and go forward?
I don't think there's any going back. For anybody who is wondering, I can tell you right now, unequivocally, we're not going back.
Yeah.
That's not going to happen. That we've never done that. We never go back
No.
to the way things were before.
The good old
Things are
days.
going to be different.
And the good old days never were the good old days.
Yeah. The question is, are we going to think through going into the future in a way that's going to be
How to best
good
do
for
it.
everybody?
Yeah.
And I don't think we are. I think that people are saying, oh, we're just going to go back to the way things were. And just like I talk about that statistic with this, 12th graders not going out as much as the 8th graders, this is a seed change. And
Okay, Mike,
we need
but-
to understand that.
So, as a historian,
Yeah.
I could tell you that it's not called history until it's over 50 years ago.
Yeah, okay.
Because until then, it's
Right.
called current events.
Yeah.
Because we have to flex and adapt and change and evolve. We don't have enough data or distance
Right.
to have perspective to say, well, this is the best thing among these options.
And that's what I'm afraid of, is
Yeah.
that we don't have enough data, so we're not going to be doing any kind of
that's the way human
qualitative or
nature works.
quantitative evaluations. We're just going to go by the seat of our pants into what life after the pandemic looks like.
But we have always done that.
I guess.
It's
I know.
not new.
It's just scary to me.
Yeah, I understand.
So let's take our break and we'll come back. And when we come back on the other side, I want to try and lighten this and talk about what we think would be good ways of going into the future.
Huh.
Hey, Brett,
Yes.
what's your favorite thing about Psych with Mike?
The opportunity to engage in mental gymnastics with you.
Wow, that is really powerful. So,
It's fun.
do you think that that's beneficial for other people?
I have no clue. I would hope so, but I have no clue.
So people should write us and let us know.
Yeah, that'd be nice.
That would be great.
Especially if they agree with me.
As always, if it's Friday, it's Psych with Mike. Okay, we're back. So when I am talking about going into the future, what I mean by that is if you aren't thinking cognitively, actually putting effort into thinking about the way things are going to be, either for you or for society on the other side of the pandemic, then it's just going to happen by chance.
I have always said that. When I work with adolescents for the last 30-something years, I have said to the adolescents, you're not driving the car of your life. Somebody else is.
Mm-hmm.
And somebody else always will if you allow it. If you want to drive, you got to get in the front seat. You got to learn how to drive. Got to get your driver's license. You got to determine, where am I going to go? Because if you just drift, somebody else will steer the boat.
Mm-hmm.
And that's happening now too.
Mhm.
And most of us are drifters.
Mm-hmm.
Most of us just happily drift along.
So we're not actually putting energy into thinking about what life after the pandemic is going to be.
No.
And so for people
we
who are
have
listening
a more
to this,
myopic focus. I'm
Yeah.
worried about, can I buy enough groceries this week?
Mhm.
Does the store have enough toilet paper? Will I have to stock up on vodka? What am I needing to do in the immediate moment for my best comfort?
Mhm.
And then if I can do that to an adequate level so I'm not having an immediate crisis, then I step back and say, well, what about next week?
right,
But I'm not saying, what about 5 years down the road? What about 10 years down the road?
Right.
What are my investment strategies for buying stock in the market?
right. So you're talking from a Maslowian perspective, this idea of hierarchy. The first thing is, do I have my needs met? Then I can move up to higher level functions. And you're just saying that you, from what you've seen, you think most people are just operating in that space of, do I have my needs met?
I think that's always been the case.
Yeah. Yeah. And so what I would encourage people to do, to the extent that they're able, I understand that this is a spectrum, it's not a point on the graph, is to think about, what do you want your life to look like? We all have an opportunity in this moment to go forward
But we
with
always
intention.
have the opportunity, Mike. I mean, you go back in the 1960, there was a book that came out,
Yeah.
Vance Packard wrote, called The Status Seekers, that described how susceptible we are to the imagery of the mob and the value system that they apply to us. And so we have to have the right car. We have to have the right education. We have to have the 2.4 kids, and the golden retriever in a station wagon living in the suburbs. What's the ideal? And then Alvin Toffler came along with a book called Future Shock, where he tried to project out changes in trends and modifications of society. And the information has always been available to think in larger chunks about your own personal life, your goals, your agendas, retirement. I mean, most Americans who are retiring now have less than $50,000 in the bank in savings for retirement. So when you quit working and you move to retirement, you have Social Security if you've qualified, if you have enough quarters in to draw Social Security, and maybe $50,000. Most of us, many of us, will die in poverty because medical costs will eat us up, all of our assets, because it's unbelievable that our system doesn't change the way medicine works in terms of pharmaceutical costs, in terms of hospital costs, in terms of insurance procedures. We don't think about that.
So let me ask you a question.
Yeah.
So what you're talking about is from a financial perspective. Okay,
that's right. One element.
Okay, yes. So if we eliminate that as a variable in the equation.
I got enough money. I don't have to worry about money.
Do you believe that people in general have the ability to look at their lives and to try and go forward with intention, or do you think that that is beyond most people?
I think they have the ability. I don't think they use it.
Yeah.
I have the ability to sword fight and tap dance, but I don't use it. I haven't developed it. I don't harness it. It's there. I think most of us...
That's a great point. It's not just having the ability, it's actually doing it and developing it.
With intentionality and purpose. Acquiring a skill, acquiring a directional goal, acquiring an ability.
Right.
I don't speak foreign languages. Should I? I could. I could take classes on the internet. I could learn to speak a foreign language. Most Americans don't.
Right. So it's not just saying, okay, I would like to try and apply intention to moving forward past the pandemic. It's that some of the skills that may be required for that may not be skills that I've practiced and honed.
Absolutely.
And that's going to make it harder. Yeah.
But that's not new.
That's not new.
Always been out there before we had the pandemic.
And
back when we were worried about the communist monolith,
right,
and sending Americans off to fight around the world to defeat institutional communism.
Okay, so this is my theory, and I could be completely wrong, but when we talk about non-normative life events, things that don't happen in the predictable path of the lifespan, the assassination of President Kennedy was a non-normative life event. 9/11 was a non-normative life event. Now the pandemic has been a non-normative life event.
Right.
But the thing that is true about the pandemic that isn't true about the rise of communism or the space race or all of those other things that we could point out as non-normative life events is that this was worldwide. So all of those other things were either aspects of a nation or aspects of a given philosophy like communism versus capitalism. This has been worldwide, and because of the ubiquitousness of it, I think it has a different impact on our psyche. Do you agree with that?
No.
Okay.
No.
So that's where we would be different. Okay.
I have friends in France, which is an advanced civilization, a society much like our own, and we compare them one to one. People believe in education. They work hard. They make money. They have hospitals and highways. I mean, it's a developed society.
Right.
They're having riots in Paris and in major cities throughout France because the government is trying to force them to get vaccinated and to wear masks. Same damn thing's happening in the United States. It's not a matter of being in another country. It's a matter of human nature. And as systems, if you look at systems, our systems ebb and flow through cycles. Right now we're moving towards an authoritarian cycle. People want authoritarian governments to tell them what to do and how to behave, as long as the clothing that the government wears is under the guise of personal freedom. We're going to give you personal freedom. We're going to tell you what you have to do. We're not going to let you marry same-sex gender. We're not going to let you have abortions. We're not going to make you, we're not going to have the super wealthy have to pay taxes. We're going to live this way, but you're going to have personal freedom. You're going to be able to walk to your grocery store. I mean, you may have to carry a gun, and you may have to stop a robbery with your gun because good guys with guns defeat bad guys with guns. You know, it's all that bullshit. It drives me crazy. But that's the messaging that's going out there, and not just in the United States. Countries, especially Western democracies, are moving in the direction of authoritarian government. And at some point, that pendulum will start to swing and will move back to a liberal perspective, a more liberal perspective, until the pendulum gets too far.
But so then,
it just goes back and forth.
So are you saying that because of that undercurrent that seems to be moving through most of the world, that that's going to limit people's ability to apply intentionality to their own? Okay.
Yes.
Yeah. But there are some people who are going to have
people, yeah.
Right. And so if we're preaching to the choir, what I would want to say to people is that I am trying to apply this to myself. I would encourage other people to think about this idea of what is the definition of you going to be coming out of the pandemic, to take some responsibility for that and to apply intentionality to that, and don't let it be something where you're just a leaf in the current.
So when we have this conversation in a clinical therapeutic setting, and we say, let's speculate on whether or not you can think yourself out of this box that you're in. One of the things that always comes down to the central thematic question: what is the cost-benefit ratio?
Okay, I agree.
And so what will these hypothetical options cost you in terms of effort, in terms of social connection, in terms of pushback from systems?
Right.
And what will they benefit you in terms of your personal satisfaction or your freedom of opportunity?
Yeah.
Can we speculate about that?
Well, and this is the thing that I'm really trying to look at myself. Is it better to be happy, or is it better to make a lot of money?
Oh, to find happy. My wife asked me the question the other day, well, what makes you happy?
Yeah.
And I was stunned because I never think in terms of that question.
But that's what I think is that people don't think in terms of happiness. And so you're not even able to answer that question.
I'm not trained to think that way. I never have been. I've been trained to meet the answer to the question, what are your responsibilities? What are your obligations? What are your obligations for taking care of people, for your friends, for your neighbors, for your family?
So it's not even just about how much money you have and does that make you happy. It's about the obligation piece of it.
Because that's the way that I was raised. That's the script I've internalized. Now, I am free to choose that script. But for me to get to a place where I give myself permission to change that script, I have to ask the cost-benefit ratio.
Yeah.
A new script will cost what?
Right.
And how will it pay? Will I be happy if I give everything away and go live in the woods? Will I be happy? I mean, there's this 81-year-old guy in Maine that's been living by himself for 20 years in the woods, whose house just got burned down yesterday. He's in jail because he was freeloading on this piece of property. And he's lived there without harming. I mean, most people didn't even know it was there. Property owners didn't even know it was there. But now they're like, oh, it doesn't meet the sanitation code for solid waste disposal, so the city ordinances say you got to move him out.
Yeah. So then for me, what I would be saying to people would be, the first thing I guess you have to do is try and give yourself permission to evaluate the question, what makes you happy?
Yeah, and that's the question my wife keeps asking, and in terms of her life, in terms of encouraging me with my life, what makes you happy? What can we do that makes you happy? Are you preparing the things you need to prepare so that you can be happy?
Right. And is that as important or more important to you than money or this obligation
money is a component.
piece?
If I have enough money, I can acquire the things that I think will make me happy, like a new stereo or a new car. Will those things make me happy? Well,
exactly.
Probably not. because we have an endless amount of hunger, and we get sold, we get marketed.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, this is sexy, this is nice, this is flashy. If you just had this, you'd be happy.
Right.
So if I follow those things, and I chase them like a dog chasing his tail, what my wife is suggesting is stand still. Don't chase your tail. Go inside and ask, what is it you want? What is it you value? What is it that will bring you peace and satisfaction?
Yeah. Well, and I think that's the hard part is the going inside.
Yeah, absolutely.
And allowing yourself to be quiet with yourself
Which
long
is
enough.
where therapy comes in, because
Yeah.
it can create that timeout moment where those questions can be asked and those anxieties can be encountered in a safe, holding environment.
Right. Well, I have to say, I really enjoyed this conversation more than I even thought that I would. So thank you very much.
Oh, you're welcome.
And as always, if you have questions about something that we have discussed or you have an idea of something you would like for us to discuss, you can get us at psychwithmike.com. The music in Psych with Mike is written and performed by Mr. Benjamin DeClue. And as always, if it's Friday, it's Psych with Mike.